Welcome back to another episode of the Bono's Real Estate Podcast. I just wanted to emphasize real quick how excited I am that you chose to tune into this episode of the podcast. I sat down for an hour with Arizona Department of Real Estate's Commissioner, Susan Nicolson, and we discuss so many important topics revolving around the real estate space. Whether you're a real estate practitioner, whether you're a lender, whether you're in title and escrow, or even if you're a consumer, this episode has so much value for you. So I'm going to jump right into this episode. I just wanted to thank you and emphasize how excited I am that you chose to tune into this episode. I really hope that you enjoy it. And do me a favor, once you're done listening or watching, please let me know what you think. Shoot me a text, shoot me a DM, reach out on YouTube. However you want to reach out, let me know what you think about what Susan Nicolson, the ADRE Commissioner, had to say during this interview. Please enjoy. Oh, first of all, thank you for tuning into this episode. This is going to be a jam-packed episode with lots of value, with lots of education. And I am fortunate enough to be joined by Commissioner Susan Nicolson with the Arizona Department of Real Estate today. And I actually introduced myself, and I introduced you a little bit in before the episode. But I'd like you to have the chance to introduce yourself to everybody. So please, go ahead.
Oh, great. Well, Governor Hobbs appointed me to the position of commissioner at the Arizona Department of Real Estate. I took office on February 21st. I'm a 28-year real estate veteran. So I came right out of the trenches of transaction sides. I think individual production was right around 10 million a year. I was a real estate educator, so I owned a real estate school, was qualified and taught all categories of continuing education, was qualified for broker management clinics, pre-licensing, so the full junket of education, taught national certifications and designations for National Association of Realtors designations, and in addition to that, I was a volunteer leader. So I was a very proud realtor, but I had to give up my realtor R to come and serve on the other side of the table, and I was the president-elect for the West and Southeast Realtors of the Valley, better known as We Serve. I was also in the National Association of Realtors Leadership Academy, so
Very nice.
Was going to progress up the ranks of realtor leadership, but then this opportunity came, and it's where I felt that I could make the most positive impacts and changes in the industry, so I took it.
Very cool. So I want to go back. You kind of explained your real estate progression and what got you here. What got you into real estate in the first place? What was the thing that got you into it?
So my original license, I worked at Marriott Vacation Club in timeshare. So initially I worked in customer relations, communications. I'm a process and procedure type gal. I would set up the sales operation process procedure and back end. And I opened new and emerging markets. So I opened up offices in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, London, Spain, internationally. And then Marriott's Canyon Villas was actually my last project opening with Marriott, and I left because I became a mom, and so I was putting in huge, long, unflexible hours at the Marriott family and wanted more flexibility. I actually started out with the intention of being a stay-at-home mom, but going from sort of a pretty intense corporate role to stay-at-home mom duties, I think I found myself kind of climbing the walls. It wasn't everything for me, and it wasn't a great fit for me personally. I have mad respect for women who have been stay-at-home moms, because it's not an easy gig. And and so I decided, like, I've got this real estate license. Let's see where we can go with that. So Marriott Relocation was my first account.
Oh, okay, really?
Yeah.
All right. So that's you went from relationship business to relationship business. So it seems like an easy transition. I know there are some people who transition from like engineering into real estate, and that's always so interesting to me, that transition, because it's so different. Like real estate is such a relationship business, and so it makes sense that that's where you came from. So as I was explaining before the podcast started, a lot of people are very excited for this discussion to kind of hear some of the things that Susan and the department are doing in Arizona. And so there was a lot of questions that were sent to me to be asked to Commissioner Nicolson. And so I'm going to start that off right now. And we'll kind of go back and forth between things that I'm curious about and what the audience is curious about. So the first question, can team names have the words realty or real estate in their team name or marketing, i.e. email, social media, etc.?
Yeah, so I guess the answer is kind of I don't care if it's not confusing to the public, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the rule for team advertising that I think is important for licensees to understand is if you're going to show your team name, you better show your brokerage name with it.
Okay.
Right. So at one glance, if I'm looking at a computer screen, I don't want to have to scroll to the bottom of the screen to find your brokerage name, but up at the top of it, I see your team name. I see that violation quite often.
Okay. Right.
So team name right next to brokerage name. And then prominently displayed is what our statutes and our rules sort of go into. Right. And that's been described through the years by different commissioners in different ways. And as a practitioner, it was one of the things that I found tremendously frustrating because, you know, I personally would hire graphic designers and graphic artists to help me with my branding, and telling the graphic designer, okay, well, my brokerage name needs to be prominently displayed. And they, you know, they look at you and they're like, okay, and what does that mean? And I'm like, well, you know, if it's a pink Post-it note surrounded by all yellow Post-it notes on this billboard that you're looking at, that pink Post-it note is prominently displayed. Gotcha. Well, that was one of the ways the department had actually explained prominently displayed before. Okay. And so a graphic artist looks at that and they're like, you're kidding, right? You got more than that. So I'm a lot less sort of pink and yellow, and I'm much more, your team name cannot be larger than your brokerage name. Okay. And I'm not talking about the font size, right? So if the brokerage name is, you know, A Realty, and the team name is the very best team that ever lived in Arizona and practiced real estate team, right? Well, then I guess A Realty is going to be enormous because we're not talking about font size, right? We're talking about like the length times width, how much area is covered, and your brokerage better get at least equal billing. And in my opinion, that gives the consumer a 50-50 shot at finding your designated broker and who you actually report to. Okay.
What about, and this is something that I just thought of as well, take a postcard. And a realtor is going to be sending out a postcard, and they have what you're talking about. They have their brokerage and their team and their graphics that they want on there. This may be a simple answer and an obvious one, but this is what I want to do in this conversation because there's a lot of people who have confusion about things. The fair housing, equal opportunity, little emblem at the bottom. What does that have to be on? What does it not have to be on?
So there's actually guidelines for like what size that should be as far as the best practice. And that falls into federal regulations. So usually it's actually your brokerage that has the requirement that you display the Equal Housing Opportunity Fair Housing logo on there. Because what it does is it demonstrates that a brokerage affirmatively forwards the practices of fair housing, that this is where they stand. But there's not actually a law on the books that say you have to display this logo. So it's not illegal advertising, but
can't be fined
in the event that you violate federal fair housing and your practice has not been to put that little house with the equal sign in it all over everything that you've ever printed that is an advertisement in real estate, then it would be a contributing factor to sort of say, you know, you don't support fair housing. And so most brokerages have it in their broker policy manual. It's not something that falls into like Title 32, Chapter 20, but it certainly is a best practice. And there certainly is, there are size guidelines as far as HUD is concerned with how large you should make the Equal Housing Opportunity.
And it's a best practice that most... Okay.
And I doubt any of your listeners work for a brokerage that don't require it as part of their broker policy manual.
Okay. Good to know. This is actually something coming from the title and escrow side. Are there things that we can do, and I'll speak for Pioneer Title, are there things that we can do to help your department support you and make things easier on your end? Is there anything that we can do?
You know, title and escrow and affiliated businesses that are involved with real estate licensees. It's such an interesting progression over my real estate career. You know, early on, title companies were really, really clear. Like, I can't even make color photo copies for you without you paying for the toner and the paper and, you know, your 50% share for marketing and everything. And then, you know, mid 80s, RESPA had an amendment that said if you're an owner of a title company, you can receive profits from a title company. And so it was kind of this, oh, okay, well, with disclosure, and you have to be a bona fide business, and you know, and there's all these rules and regs around the exception that was built into RESPA. But what I found now is there are a lot of partnerships, and whether you call it affiliated business arrangements under RESPA, some people call them joint ventures, some people call them marketing service agreements. I know a lot of title insurance attorneys have given advice to real estate practitioners saying, you know, this is perfectly legal, sign up for this and you can, you know, earn more at every deal.
Right.
And, you know, go back to your real estate pre-licensing courses and what you learned about the federal law. And if it seems too good to be true, or it seems like it should be uneasy, you know, really seriously and truly hook yourself up, not just with an attorney who's familiar with the federal laws, but with an attorney who's familiar with the laws and the requirements that are in Title 32, Title 20, Title 6. You know, title companies can be great partners to real estate licensees by helping them stay on the right side of the law. Because I think a lot of times title companies mean well, and they're trying to go out there and get market share. And I think I've spoken with a lot of realtors that are like, no, the attorney said it was all good. And I was like, well, you know, whose attorney? They're like, well, the title insurance company's attorney.
Right.
And I'm like, well, you know, maybe you should hire your own attorney,
right,
to look at it from the real estate statute
right.
side of things. So I know a lot of times title and escrow are asked to do things that are really outside of the scope of the permissions section within the contract, and really things that the licensed agent needs to be doing.
Right.
And so the title and escrow industry can certainly help by pushing back on those licensees and saying, you know, the commissioner's office has made it very, very clear that we are not fiduciaries here. You know, we are not representing the parties, and so you're going to have to write your own addendum to the purchase contract, and those sort of things that for many years title and escrow have just done things as a courtesy or to maintain relationships and to maintain businesses. And really truly real estate agents need to stop asking, and the real estate agents that are asking, it would be great if they get a little bit of pushback, like, you do understand, you know, you're putting yourself at risk, because given transaction software, it's very easy for me to see who originated what.
Okay. That's good information. To your point about some of the things that escrow does and some of the things that real estate licensees do, there was a few members of Pioneer Title who were at one of the events that you spoke at, and they had a question that they wanted you to explain a little bit further for us. You had mentioned something about keep escrow in their lane and realtors in their lane. I'm sure they're paraphrasing. Expand on that.
Sure. So escrow is supposed to be a neutral third party.
Okay.
Right? I mean, does anybody disagree with that? I would certainly hope not.
Answer in the comments.
Right. Answer in the comments, but I can see you in the comments, so maybe you don't want to. Escrow is supposed to be a neutral third party. And so when you have a real estate licensee who owns part of a title insurance company, and that ownership in the title insurance company, realtor and title company own a company together. And then the title company, half of the owner says, I'll let you borrow this escrow officer for all of these transactions that are going on there. That escrow officer has a conflict of interest. Like, in essence, one of your bosses is one of the realtors who's party to it. And my understanding, and this is certainly not my part of regulation and enforcement, it falls under Department of Insurance and Financial Institutions, but my understanding is there's a requirement that the escrow officer would disclose and say, hey, I'm not really a neutral third party here. And it's a material fact in a purchase contract that the escrow officer is not necessarily completely neutral. And so if there's a real estate licensee who's recommending a certain title insurance and escrow company that they're affiliated with, and they do their disclosure, is your disclosure only disclosing your financial interest, or are you also disclosing that there's a lack of neutrality there, with the person who is ultimately going to make earnest money, cancellation, return decisions? And am I looking at dishonest dealings inside of real estate transactions, which then falls into my statutes that I regulate, because Title 32, Chapter 20 doesn't allow for dishonest dealings. Yeah.
So, great information. Are there any recent horror stories that you can tell us, without naming names, of course, that can kind of give everyone an example of certain things to where they can kind of protect themselves, make the right decisions, do business the right way, and that goes for everyone?
Yeah.
And just as reminders, is there anything that you can provide us?
So the department's well aware that there was a big text message blast that was sort of like, hey, you're so busy, you should be focused on selling real estate. How about I do your continuing education for you? And that's really not a good idea.
Okay, wait, back up. Somebody wanted to do the continuing education for the licensee, so the licensee didn't have to do it?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll set the course for you.
Okay.
So you pay me, and I'll attend your real estate continuing education classes, and then I'll give you the certificate that I earned. And so the department's really where, I know, and it goes down to the people that think that they're not going to get caught, that there's not a trail of IP addresses and like all of that tech, and maybe they don't understand the Department of Real Estate has subpoena power, and so once we track down what service has leased out the cell phone number that did the blast, we can get back to the party, we can start tracing IP addresses and everything else, and we can it's like that sweater and it's got a loose thread on it and you just start pulling it and more and more and more and more thread comes out. So don't be foolish. The continuing education is there by statute. It's designed to help you learn something, get those nuggets out of it. Try to go to the best continuing education that's out there, right? So many licensees wait until the end of their renewal period and then they go to the least expensive, however I can get it at the most convenient delivery option, and they don't do anything to actually further their real estate knowledge and use that opportunity. And so it's like, if you're a 10-year practitioner, why are you taking Agency 101? Like, do you still need Agency 101 or should you be challenging yourself and maybe investing in your career and your knowledge base and taking some of the more complex agency courses that are out there? Because, reasonable skill and care is, well, what would the average real estate agent have known? But to sort of say that I would be comparing what a 10-year practitioner who's done thousands of transactions should know versus a first-year practitioner would not really measure up with the atoms that float around in my brain and how I would apply the statutes. And so I think it really behooves real estate licensees, like, don't be stupid. Don't pay somebody to do your CE for you. If there's a course provider out there who says, I'll sell you certificates, eventually you're going to get caught. And, I can tell you the way you get caught is you tell somebody who doesn't think it's okay and they turn you in, or you get divorced and that person turns you in, or somebody gets fired at an organization or severed, or there's a bad business deal and that person turns you in. But you're really, really running at a risk because, those are the types of things that I'll move toward revoking licenses for.
Okay. You had mentioned at our Prescott event that there was going to be new ways to get CE credits to where you don't have to get them 3 at a time. You can get 1 if you need 1. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's already in process right now. And I can give you like a scoop on an announcement that I'm going to make on September 6th too. So,
all right.
So yeah, I approved 1 credit hour increments of continuing education.
Yeah.
So I always preferred in-person education when I could get it. And sometimes I needed to use the online delivery because I was a busy real estate practitioner. So I preferred going in person, but the necessity of completing my hours, sometimes I needed to go online to find that exact category.
Right.
And it's a lot easier if you're a practicing real estate agent to take an hour out of your day to go and learn something new. And there's a lot of course categories that I think could be applicable and expanded, and you could have an hour of excellent content, but you couldn't necessarily make that a 3-hour course.
That makes sense.
You would lose the quality of the education.
Right.
So I would rather give schools the opportunity to build 1 credit hour, which is 50 minutes of instruction, 1 credit hour increments of high quality education, then see some of these subjects that are certainly worthy to be taught in real estate, but they're diluted over 3 hours. And so instead of an invigorating hour of I learned something, it's, 30 minutes of this course is great, and 2 hours and 30 minutes of maybe if I stab myself in the eyeball with a pen, I can go to the emergency room and get out of here, right? Like, you just, it shouldn't be that way. And so I see it as giving schools, which are businesses, more flexibility in creating programs that are applicable to the industry and staying more current with what's happening in the industry. So yeah, it's already in place.
Very
All right,
cool.
so the scoop.
The scoop.
Broker licenses. So once upon a time, what the statutes require is that you have 3 years of experience as a sales licensee, and that your experience qualifies you to become a broker. And in the past, the way that was determined is there was a form, the 226 form, that somebody you would have to fill out, the candidate. So you've gone to school, you've taken your classes, and now you have to go to your employing broker, and you have to say, I want to be a broker too, sign this to say that I have the qualifications. Well, when I became commissioner, I found out that some brokers said, no, don't want you to get your broker's license. And how inequitable is that? So here you have like one brokerage where the broker may not even know the broker candidate personally. And then maybe you have another broker where they're like, nope, I don't want the competition. You don't get to come to the broker club. I don't want you to get that level of respect in your industry. And it's all over the place as far as what's coming through to the department that this person signed off that person is qualified. And remember, I get to see all the complaints and all the cases, and I'm like, who are you to be saying whether or not somebody's qualified? I'm questioning whether or not you're qualified at this point. So it seemed like a terribly inequitable solution that people would have to get their current employer and sometimes even your past employers, right? Because it's several years. So you could have had a falling out with your previous brokerage and left them, and now you're at a great brokerage. That person signs off, but you still need 1 year or 2 years worth of history from somebody that you severed with. And good luck getting it. And so we've changed the form, and we've made it much more sort of like, what's your resume say that you've done? And we want to hear about how active you are in the industry. We want to hear about, do you educate people in the industry? Are you actively practicing? What type of real estate are you actively practicing? And we really are having the Department of Real Estate make the decisions now on the qualifications of somebody to get a broker's license, which will make it much more equitable. And you won't have to have a signature in order to be able to take your exam.
Interesting. Yeah, I was not aware of that you had to go to your broker to become a broker. So great information. Okay. And that, first of all, you said September 6th, it's going into effect, or you're announcing it on September 6th?
So I've already changed the form and put it out there because it's
Okay.
less restrictive than before. So it's a less restrictive policy and it's not going to harm anybody. September 6th is our Education Town Hall, which is a public meeting. So the Department of Real Estate is actively working to redo the pre-licensing education and the pre-licensing exam.
Right.
So on September 6th, we'll be holding a work group with subject matter experts, and we're going to start reviewing the new course outline. So the syllabus is going to change. We'll probably go from about a 16-page syllabus that was very, very vague without a lot of information to, you know, over 125-page syllabus. So we really want to provide schools and candidates with the information that they need and a detailed outline course syllabus of what they need to understand and at what level they need to understand it in order to earn their real estate license. And the overall goal is for people that have finished their 90 hours of pre-licensing and taken their contract writing and passed the test, that they actually understand how to practice real estate, that they don't get to the other side and go, oh my goodness, I'm actually not prepared to go out there and list houses and represent buyers and write contracts and negotiate this. I don't know what I'm doing, right? We don't want that. We want them to be able to hit the ground running and then reach out to brokerages and say, help me build a real estate business, right? So it shouldn't be up to the brokers to have to teach them the base knowledge of how to competently practice real estate and not go out there and harm the public. That's the role of the department. And right now, I think we're missing the mark. And, you know, and I say that not just from my own opinion. I've done now over 100 events or engagements of outreach to the industry. And I typically ask the question when I have a fairly large crowd, you know, of all of you licensees out there, how many of you feel that the pre-licensing education and exam prepared you for the actual practice of real estate? Please raise your hand. And no one has raised their hand yet. And I've spoken with thousands of practicing realtors. And so I know that the education and the test are missing the mark of what I would feel really proud of. And, you know, it's going to be a moving target and constant refinement and a long-term project for the department. It's not a one and done type situation.
Okay, so going back, you were talking a little bit about RESPA. So for the people listening, there is a variety of people who listen to this. There's realtors, there are lenders, there are title folks, there are consumers. And I want to break certain things down so that people get a good understanding and they're not leaving here wondering what something is and being confused about something. So what is RESPA? What does it stand for? And kind of give a brief description of what that is and how it's involved in the real estate world.
So RESPA is a federal law. It's the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. And the intent of the law in RESPA 8A, which is what ties to real estate, is you shouldn't be taking kickbacks from affiliated businesses because if, for instance, I'll say title company, since I'm not a title company today, but it could be mortgage company, it could be lender, it could be any number of other affiliated businesses. But if the title company is able to give the real estate licensee a $2,000 kickback on a $400,000 home purchase, then they would have equally have been able to just lower their rates and save the home buyer and the home seller $2,000. And so the whole concept behind RESPA really ties into affordable housing. So everybody in the industry sits there and says, we have an affordable housing crisis on our hands and we can't build ourselves out of it and we need more housing supply. And yes, and yes, and yes to all of that. But we also need a fair, level playing field for the consumers out there where they aren't paying higher closing costs to be able to cross that finish line, to have to save up an extra couple $1,000 if that's what it is. In order to pay their closing costs. That's like the hardest part, I think, for a lot of people is to save the money that they're going to need to send us that final wire transfer, that final bit of money going over to the escrow officer. That's what they're waiting to save up. And so if there's kickbacks in the real estate industry, that are not allowable under the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, then you're ultimately making it more expensive for people to buy houses. So you're part of the affordable housing problem. You know, you're part of one little tiny part that makes housing less achievable for people. And so RESPA is a federal law, and RESPA is enforced by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but the state attorney general can also bring a RESPA lawsuit. And then in addition to the federal law, Arizona has laws in real estate, which is Title 32, Chapter 20, about how disclosure needs to happen, the timeliness of disclosure. Are you really giving a buyer or a seller the opportunity to shop around and get the best deal? Because that's what those disclosures are intended for. Not just to say, hey, I get some money out of this gig, but it's to say, hey, I get some money out of this gig and you have an opportunity to not utilize me and what I'm suggesting. You should know I get some money out of this gig, and so you should probably shop. And so is the intent of that disclosure actually being delivered to the consumers that are out there? And that's something that we will focus on, and that our investigators are going off for some training in Utah in another month, and our auditors are being trained on looking at a transaction from a slightly different perspective. And so not so much as every page initialed and, you know, did everybody sign where they were and can I check the boxes, but the things that real estate licensees were supposed to do to protect the public, to put their client's best interest over and before their own, that duty of loyalty in the fiduciary duties and that duty of disclosure in the fiduciary duties, is all of that being delivered correctly? So our department is ramping up and training on that right now. And then for title insurance, you guys have Title 20 that you have to worry about, right? You know, that's theirs. Escrow officers have Title 6 that they are governed by. And so there's a lot of regulation. I can say, you know, Governor Hobbs is working tirelessly to build an Arizona for everyone, right? That's what we hear when we're in cabinet meetings, building an Arizona for everyone. And that implies a level of fairness that should be involved in things that we do. And in looking at building an Arizona for everyone, then I have to regulate in a way where I look at the title and chapter that I'm responsible for and deliver that fairly. But I have to also take the knowledge that I have of being a practitioner and what should be done and what the intent of the things were, and is that being delivered? And I need to ring that through for the industry. For far too long, you would talk to real estate licensees and they will say, we need more professionalism in real estate. We got to raise the bar of professionalism in real estate. And I tried as a realtor leader, right? There are videos of me out there on the web talking about attributes of a professional in a real estate transaction and what that should look like and what you should strive to be. But as a regulator, it's less about me saying you should strive to be. It's an opportunity for me to say, no, you will be. You will do the right thing for the people of Arizona that's required by your license that I'm supposed to regulate. And so the auditors and the investigators at the department are very much learning from me and from Deputy Commissioner Neat and from our new Audits and Investigations Manager, what our expectations are for practitioners in the actual practice of real estate. And we're going to look for more than just completion of initials. You know, broker supervision is going to be looked at like never before, because if a licensee is determined to if not to what they're for in Section 8, up to their eyeballs, and make things less clear because they don't understand there's an additional clause addendum that covered that better, and open up the public to risk because they weren't aware of their association's latest forms and what they should be utilizing, we will start to apply the disciplinary matrix, and we will start to hold brokers to their duties of supervision. Well, okay, hang on a second. Why didn't you supervise this transaction and jump in and say, hey, that's not how you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this way.
Right.
And so if we even see the potential harm to the public in those real estate transactions, then we are going to take disciplinary actions on those, because that's really the only way to hold the industry to a level of professionalism, to raise the bar of professionalism. Right. You know, realtors, I think, love to and hate to admit like where realtors come on the J.D. Powers surveys, right? What is it? Are they below or above used car salesmen? Somewhere right around used car salesmen, though, right? So it's not a great consumer reputation. And organized real estate, the Realtor brand, tries very, very, very hard to sort of be that shiny, pretty penny and say, no, you know, we have a code of ethics and we have this and we have this.
Right.
And you have to back that up, though, with professional behavior and professional practices. And so I really see us as, you know, a team, and the practitioners that work hard to do it right are not the ones that should have any kind of fear or intimidation from the department. I mean, the vast majority of the things that I send out at the department are letters of concern, which is not a disciplinary action, but it's kind of a nice way for me to say, in paper, not quite.
Warning.
Here's your warning, right? It's like here's your warning.
Right.
That's not exactly how you're supposed to do it. It's the shot across the bow. It's the clean it up, do better, right? It's you don't really progress into discipline with the Department of Real Estate until you've either really harmed somebody, or you've violated numerous statutes and numerous rules, or you just keep violating the same one again and again and again. Right? Like, you know, you're going to get that letter of concern for that first advertising violation, and we're going to tell you what's wrong and what you need to do, and we're going to see that you fix it. But then if you go back to your old ways, I'm going to be a lot less understanding the second time you do it.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so let's transition into a group of people who should not receive a warning and go straight to discipline, and that is fraudsters. So deep fraud and any type of fraudulent activity within the real estate world. What are you guys doing at the department to watch that, to monitor that? What's happening there?
Well, I see a lot of deed fraud. So for anyone who thinks that, you know, this will never happen to me, or it's just in rural areas, or, you know, you name it. I've heard all sorts of different reasons. Every single real estate licensee should be aware that there are sophisticated criminals out there who have stolen the identities of sellers, and they want to use you and your knowledge and your time and your marketing dollars to sell a property that they don't own. Right. And so what the Department of Real Estate has done is take cases of deed fraud and pull them apart to identify every possible crack or gap or hole in Arizona's system that these criminals are utilizing in order to steal real property. And we have put together a comprehensive list of areas where we know criminals are going in and doing things as part of either the identity theft or notarization fraud, or you name it. And there's not one way in particular that the crime is done. The crime is done in many different ways, but we're going as far as we've spoke with the Secretary of State's office, we spoke with the county recorder, we've spoke with the county assessor's office, we've spoke with lawmakers, we have covered it from A to Z. And I think in order to sort of stamp out deed fraud or title theft, I've heard it called both, but it means the same thing. There's a criminal who stole somebody's property and sold it to somebody else and took that seller's proceeds. in order for us to stamp that out, we've got to seal up all those cracks, right? It's kind of like a scorpion got into the house, so now I've got to seal my house. Well,
Right.
Arizona's got to seal its house. And so we've sort of taken all of the things, and there's a couple areas where we're going to ask real estate licensees to get involved. So one of the things that a licensee can do, one of the things we know about these criminals is they never show their face. You have no idea what they look like. Hey, so it's like, hey, Bo, it's your lucky day. I picked you out of my hat of the 92,500 real estate licensees out there. I got a piece of property out there in, I don't know, Buckeye, and I've hit some hard times. I need to sell it fast. So whatever market value is, maybe a little bit less than that. Oh, you charge, 25%? Yeah, sure, I'll pay that. I don't care. And like all these things that should be little red flags for Bo, right? Like, Bo's like, am I really that lucky? I don't know that I'm really that lucky. If I'm really that lucky, maybe I better go buy a Mega Millions lottery ticket and try to get the money legally. And so one of the things licensees can do is just say, hey, great, deed fraud is rampant right now. I'd love to represent you, but I do need to check your ID. So I'll send you a Google Meets or a Zoom or a FaceTime or any way, because they're always out of state, right? There's always a reason that they can't meet you at the land or that you can't ever meet them, right? So you're going to have to, it's like pandemic days, hey, I'll send you a Zoom link, right? And get you on camera, and I'm going to need to see your identification. And then, just look at the picture. Does it have a likeness? Because some of the criminals versus the actual sellers do not have a likeness. Does the ID even look real? We got one at the Department of Real Estate, and we did a Google image search on the photograph. It definitely looked like a fake passport identification, though, right? Like the words were all fuzzy and kind of yellowed, and the picture was crisp. And it was like, oh yeah, this isn't fake.
This looks legit.
And so, so we Google image the search of the photograph on this identification, and it's like the cover of the National Geographics in 1990 something, So we're like, oh yeah, that's his passport, sure. And so, so there's some basic little things that, hey, I don't actually know who this seller is.
Right.
I got them through a lead source. They like to use lead sources. So if you buy leads from a trusted source, they know that. And so they know that you're going to ask less questions if they come to you through lead source. And if it's vacant land, if it's probate, if the house is empty, if it's not like somebody's primary residence and they're living there and you don't know who that person is, you should probably start asking some additional questions. They like to steal houses that are in probate. They, so they will watch to see when a house goes into probate. And so one of the things that you can do, gosh forbid it makes it this far into the transaction, but many of them make it to close of escrow, as you know.
Yes.
And so say to the seller, hey, thanks so much for the insurance claims history. I'm just going to get the insurance company on the phone right now. We just need them to validate that they are the insurance company for this property.
Right.
Because if they say, no, I don't want you to do that, well, that's another red flag, right? Like there are red flags out there. I know escrow officers, title insurers, you guys have a whole long fraud checklist that you guys can go through on your end. But those are just two very, very, very easy steps that a real estate licensee can take. And legislatively, what we'd like to do is make it such that a homeowner's insurance provider would have to disclose to a real estate agent with a valid employment contract the validity of an insurance claims history letter. So that way you wouldn't even have to get the seller on the phone with you to say, let's validate the validity of this. You would just simply be able to pick up the phone. It's supposed to be Liberty Mutual. Call Liberty Mutual. Nope, it's not Liberty Mutual because the true insurer is USAA. And these criminals have no way right now in any databases that they have access to figure out who's the property insurer. So deed fraud is on the rise. The criminals, it seems like every week I find something else that the criminals are doing or utilizing, but the intention is to bring forward legislation in the next legislative session. And by bringing forward, I mean the Department of Real Estate intends to share everything that we have found as a means that criminals are utilizing in order
Right.
to steal houses and bring it to the lawmakers and say, this is
Right.
what they're doing. Could you do something about it? Because we don't write legislation at the Department of Real Estate, but I can certainly break apart the crime and let our lawmakers know where the holes are.
Right. Yeah, it seems as if with fraudulent activity in real estate, they're always 2-3 steps ahead, and we have to catch up and try to battle it and defend it. And I want to get into technology because I know a lot of people, ever since artificial intelligence has become more prevalent, especially ChatGPT, Google Bard, there's so many of them out there now. Criminals will find a way to leverage that to commit crimes. And that is going to be the case for anything. And it will make our life very convenient in a lot of cases as well. But with convenience comes inconvenience. So explain to us a little bit about what you've been seeing on the technology side. Has artificial intelligence made an appearance for you guys, or where are you at with that?
So it's kind of fun. On the intelligence side of it, we see metaverse starting to pop up, right? So real estate on the metaverse. And,
this is interesting,
right? And so you can clone the house that's at 123 Main Street. You can clone that house onto 123 Main Street in the metaverse, and using that as a catchy marketing technique to appeal to a certain area. And so one of the things that we will ask to have done in our statutes in Title 32 is to define what real estate is, that it's not existing in the metaverse or any other online platform, because tokens and tangible items that are being sold inside the metaverse, we want to make really, really clear that's not what we're regulating, and that's not what real estate licensees do in Arizona. So we've seen some of that. We've had a lot of requests for people being able to teach classes on metaverse and real estate, and even when the outline looks like it might meet one of our categories for continuing education, we have told those instructors that the department will be present to monitor and audit their class, and and they've all pulled back their classes. So so I'm not sure if they don't really feel like they have the content to deliver the number of minutes in a way that truly ties into our statutes.
Yeah, so sidebar with what you're talking about with the metaverse, it was really interesting. I was listening to a conversation between, I can't remember who the other person was, but Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook was discussing the metaverse, and he was talking with a group of people. And when you talk with people about social media, they begin to look at social media as a different reality from which people live in our reality. And it was very interesting because they are predicting that somewhere down the road, the metaverse will be primary reality. And then our reality, where we're talking now, will be secondary reality. So where, like the movie Avatar, people will be having tubes to breathe and to eat and to drink. And then the metaverse is where they're going to live. They're going to have VR goggles or whatever.
They never get old.
Interesting. So that was a very interesting conversation. VR.
So ChatGPT, right? I think it once upon a time it was pretty easy sometimes to pick up on phishing emails and things because the written word was done so poorly that you could sort of say, okay, this certainly didn't come from my bank. And AI is going to change that, because you can certainly have AI write and compose those things. So I think people with ill intent have a new tool available to them, and just as it's a tool to people that want to cause harm and do bad things, it's also a phenomenal tool and time saver for people who want to do good things, right? So it's one of those like double-edged swords, really. I mean, if you're going to let ChatGPT write your marketing verbiage, just make sure that it's fair housing compliant, please. And
well, and I've talked with a lot of people about this because, and first of all, I want to clarify, I do not want the metaverse reality to become a thing. I enjoy our reality. I hope I'm dead by the time that comes up. So I don't want that to happen, but it is very interesting that they are discussing that possibility. What did you just say? Because I had a comment on it.
Oh, ChatGPT writing your marketing verbiage and things.
So I've talked with a lot of people. ChatGPT is amazing. It can
Yeah.
come up with some really good stuff by just a simple prompt. And there's been a few people. There was actually an article by an attorney that wrote his entire thing from ChatGPT and got busted. And they were like, "That's why I'm not going to use ChatGPT." Some agents that I was talking with, like, don't let that. Still use ChatGPT, but just like anything else, go through it, make sure that it works with everything,
right,
and go for it. Don't. I mean, you still have to work a little bit.
Yeah,
if
you tell ChatGPT, write me a marketing description for the house at 123 Main Street. It has a beautiful living room and incredible views of the sunset, right?
Exactly.
And then ChatGPT gets to work and it says that it has 27 rooms, and you're like, no, actually it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, right? You got to correct that.
Correct the little things, but at least you're just correcting, not writing the whole thing.
That's right.
What I think is valuable for it. So anyways, yes, AI and the metaverse is very interesting. So there was one person here who asked a question that I'll ask you. So housing and the limited supply. They asked, you have set some lofty goals for turning around the public reports for new subdivisions. Has the department been able to deliver on that?
5 days.
5 days.
From when we receive a completed application for a public report, my department turns them around in an average of 5 days.
Boom.
Done.
Right on. There we go. Right now, we have interest rates around 8%, a little over 8%. That's a 20-year high. What's your overall feeling of the real estate market going forward?
Times are going to be a little bit tough, right? So you've got a large number of homeowners out there who have 30-year fixed mortgage rates below 3%. Right? And most of those homeowners are like, I'm going to die here. I'm not going to ever sell this house because it's almost free using the bank's money. I mean, they're right. This is true.
It's very real.
And so that motivation to sort of have that one extra bedroom, they're much more motivated to be like, so let's knock out a wall and build another bedroom if they have that ability to do that, because they understand that they probably captured that once in a lifetime opportunity to have that low fixed rate. So inventory is going to remain tight. There was a big hoopla when there was the announcement of the water study, and it basically said that we won't be issuing any more certificates of assured water supply in the areas where there's a deficiency in water, where you can't show a 100-year water supply. Now, that's not government being mean. That's the law in Arizona. That's a statute. And so as regulators, if it's statute, we have to enforce it. If it's a rule, then that's a negotiable factor for agency heads, right? But if it's in statute, then that's what the lawmakers said. And so and so that's the law. Like, if there's not a 100-year water supply, then you don't issue a certificate of assured water supply for new construction. But there are enough certificates issued out there for a couple years at the current pace of development. And I truly believe that will give the cities and towns that are involved in these areas the opportunities that they need to get the water that they need, right? Like that gives you the time to go and negotiate water agreements with people that own water. So I don't see that. I mean, things make headlines and everything, but I don't see that as something that's really going to hurt. I think there's enough out there right now, given the pace of building and the pace of the real estate market, which is not like everybody flocking because interest rates are so high. So I think for the pace that we're at right now in Arizona, there's probably enough out there, and these cities know that they need to go out there and get more water. So, so I don't see that as a problem. I mean, I cringe every time the Fed meets, just like everybody else, and kind of go, oh, please make it stop, please make it stop. And I get that. But real estate's one of those things that it's kind of like a haircut, right? Like your hair is just going to keep growing. So real estate, families are going to keep changing in sizes, and jobs are going to move from one place to another, and there's always, contributing life-changing factors for people that result in the need to change their real estate situation.
Well, Tom Ferry's 5Ds. It's diapers, diplomas, death, divorce.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I just used Facebook. You can learn everything you need to know on Facebook. People just air it all. It's like, oh, baby born. I mean, if you're a licensee and there's a baby born and you're not reaching out to see if the house is big enough, like, shame on you.
There you
go.
Like
it's everybody puts it out on socials now. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the fifth is. I think I said diamonds, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So to your point. And kind of along those lines, for you and what you're seeing in the real estate industry and what you're seeing at the department, what are your biggest challenges for the next year?
IT funding is a big challenge. The Department of Real Estate operates on a custom software solution that was written by a state employee that's still at the state, but he's getting close to retirement. And so we need to migrate over to commercially supported software. And that's a costly migration to move the database and the functionality, the licensing system, the enforcement system, and everything over. And so that will be a multi-year project and will require a lot of funding. And so it's yet to be seen if the lawmakers will see it fit to fund it out of the general fund, or if they're going to want real estate licensees to pay for the real estate system, and if that's going to look like a fund being set up, like we have a real estate recovery fund, we have an education fund. So is the legislature going to choose the avenue and say, nope, you're going to have an IT fund and you're going to fund that in your own industry? And so IT is one of the biggest things that we need to address at the Department of Real Estate with some level of urgency. But, I say urgency in the terms of the new state timelines. So, urgency when you're a small business owner and you had 3 employees was like before the end of the business day. And, we just submitted budgets that go until June of 2026. So there you have it. Like, like in the state, you're looking way, 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 further out. And so that is definitely something that we need to do. And then education is something that I've always been passionate about. I really want the quality of education to not just be, I've completed my hours like you've done a prison sentence. I really want it to be, oh my gosh, I learned so much. And so we are putting in the foundational pieces right now, the ability for licensees to rate a course after having taken it, because right now we randomly audit classes and monitor classes, but I'd like to have a much more targeted approach based off of the feedback of the licensees who just attended that course, if that's something that the department needs to look at. Beginner, intermediate, advanced, I'd like to be able to have the ability for licensees to go in and say, look, I'm not a brand new agent who needs beginner, I want advanced. Commissioner's rules or something. So it's adding more things. I kind of joke around that all pathways lead back to Kevin, who's the coder of our system, right? Because if I want to enable a search criteria, if I want to change this, if I want to change that, it all goes back to adding code to the system. So, I mean, with that said, IT, quality of education, quality of real estate practice, I'd love for that JD Powers rating to get realtors up there with, I almost said lawyers, but no, we want to do better than them. We want we want like to be considered like up there with doctors, right?
So you said JD's rating.
Yeah.
Explain to people what that is. So.
Oh, it's like a consumer rating. They do a big. JD Powers does that big survey out to consumers about all the different industries and how you think they are. Like, what's your rating of them? Are they great or are they not so great? And
it's and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's certain things like trustworthiness and all that goes into it, which is why you had mentioned used car dealers or attorneys and stuff like that, which I think everybody has heard that real estate agents can be down there, but the only agents I know are up there.
You know, I'll say this, right? There's 92,500 licensees, give or take 50. And if I were to, you know, really, and actually I said this when I interviewed with the governor's team, the vast majority of real estate licensees are the most amazing people that you will ever meet. They are small business owners who work really hard. It is a profession that is enormously intrusive into your personal life, your life with your family. And it's 7 days a week, and it's every calendar day because our contracts don't allow for holidays, right? So unless you write it in, I advise you write it in. Anyway.
Good advice.
maybe make your time periods a little bit longer over some areas, right? Because it might be hard to find a home inspector in certain weeks. Anyway, but, you know, and the vast majority of licensees are hardworking Arizonans that are supporting the economy, but not only the economy, they're like the backbones of communities. If you look at who's volunteering in schools and who's volunteering and all of these nonprofit organizations, you're going to find so many real estate licensees. It's one of the reasons I gave as a volunteer leader so much to the real estate industry, because I was surrounding myself by some of the best humans that you can possibly imagine being surrounded by.
Yes.
And, you know, sometimes after a rough day, I have to sort of take a deep breath and remember that I'm just currently surrounded by like 150 of the worst of them, who the vast majority would say, yeah, flush them out because they bring the rest of us down. But by and large, the majority of licensees are the most amazing people. And the Department of Real Estate really wants to be your partner. We strive to have a high level of efficiency, of transparency, of outreach, of education. As we change our auditing process, we will be doing education and outreach before rollout. It's not something that I'm required to do by statute, but gosh, I think it's fair. And the goal is ultimately to give you the knowledge and the tools so that you can do your own self audits. And when you are told that you're going to be audited by the department, I want you to say like, I'm ready. Bring it on. Bring it on. I know I'm in compliance because you taught me what I needed to do to be in compliance. There's a lot of things in title and statute right now that I have to regulate that I think made a lot of sense when they were written maybe in the 70s and the 60s. But now we have this internet, websites, you know, a pandemic happened. All of our brick and mortars got closed, you know, like all these different things, advancements in technology have happened, and Title 32, Chapter 20 doesn't necessarily reflect that. So I think there's a lot of time that realtors as business owners, especially brokerage owners, spend in regulatory compliance that doesn't necessarily serve to protect the public anymore, right? And so we're going through our title and chapter and we're saying, you know, is this regulation causing a business owner to have to spend time or money? And does it still serve to protect the public, or has technology answered that question? So we're going to go through and ask, it's called an omnibus bill, and we will be trying to find a lawmaker and get industry support behind it. But the intent of the omnibus is to take things that, with fresh eyes coming in as a new commissioner and looking at the statutes and understanding the real estate practice and sort of saying, well, that makes no sense, or that's tremendously unfair, or that's hugely burdensome, and to fix those areas of law to make it a better profession for everyone.
Absolutely. So amazing information. Thank you again. We're going to wrap up, but there was a comment that somebody wanted to make about you and the department, and so I wanted to share that, and then we'll wrap up here. But so this person says, having been a car dealer, which is funny that we were just talking about them, the state licensing is abysmal at best. When I made the switch, I was greeted and welcomed into the office. Exactly 180 degrees from the MVD. It is so amazing having support from a government licensing agency instead of one just trying to fine you. Keep up the great work and customer service at the Department of Real Estate.
Thanks.
So just wanted to share that. So we're going to wrap up. Thank you guys for tuning into this whole thing. I know it was valuable to you guys. I know it was valuable to me. To wrap up, I would love for you to ask everybody a question in lending, in title, in real estate, something for them to think about as they leave this podcast today.
Wow.
And I put her on the spot.
Wow.
I didn't let her prepare for this, but I know you can handle it.
So what I would challenge the industry to do is to say, and kind of goes back to the whole realtor thing, and not every licensee is a realtor, and I get that, but the majority of you are. Who are you? What do you stand for? And do your business practices reflect that? Because times are going to be a little bit tighter. They are tight now, and I don't think that the squeezing of that is over yet. Personally, I have no data behind that belief other than my own watching the markets and everything. And don't lose who you are, your integrity, the thing that makes you magnificent and wonderful and likable. Don't lose your value out of the desperation of needing another sale. Like, remember that real estate's not the only way that you can earn money that's out there, and certainly don't turn to illegal ways to earn money, but don't lose who you are. So, when you're faced with opportunities that might not align with who you are, take a deep breath and have the courage to say no to them. Because on the regulator side of things, it doesn't feel good to have to strip somebody of a real estate license. And I know you're going into a rough market. You've been in kind of a tougher, tighter market already, but don't lose who you are.
Very inspirational. I appreciate that. I appreciate you making the time to come. Everybody knows that you're extremely busy, so I appreciate it. And for everybody listening, I'm very excited to share with you. So thanks for tuning in. Susan, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Bo.
Appreciate you.